Hey, good morning, everybody. Peter Boyles in for another day off with George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. We are Denver's talk station. Good to have you here. 710 KNUS Weather Center weather, 52 the high today. Tomorrow, I'll be back here tomorrow morning at 9, 58 degrees, and on Sunday, 60 degrees in the city. 710 KNUS, the lines are wide open, and we're going to do this. This question, I think, is so significant. We talked about it before the show began. Billy and I, the world is turning against Israel. Why? If it is true, and it is true, why? And also goes with that, again, the rise of this anti-Semitic act, or a series of anti-Semitic attacks in the United States of America. So the world's turning against Israel. Watch, by the way, this is the 70th. Today marks the 70th day of this war. And the idea of putting a number on the end, which I think you can't do. Number two, it ends when they end, or if they end. And the other part of it is, what is the war aim? Successful wars must have aims. Just to give you an idea, I did some roundup stuff last night. A court in the Netherlands is going to rule today whether or not the Dutch government needs to stop supplying F-35 fighter jet parts, to Israel. Benjamin Reese, a 51-year-old male middle school teacher in U.S., arrested last week after he threatens to behead a Muslim child who's offended by the Israeli flag. German authorities said Thursday that they have arrested 4 people in part of another terror plot linked to Hamas, and they're plotting to attack Jewish sites in Europe. Wartime opinion polls amongst Palestinians, Billy and I were talking about this, overwhelming support for Hamas. Overnight Israeli attacks, and we read the news and looked at the news, but Joe Biden has jumped into this. I got some Biden quotes where Joe Biden is telling the Israelis how to run their war. Joe Biden yesterday, the president said, I read it to you, said this on Tuesday, I apologize, that Israel is losing support over its indiscriminate bombing of Gaza, and then Benjamin Netanyahu should change, exposing, again, these relationships between the U.S. and Israel. Biden's remarks made to donors to his 2024 re-election campaign. Joe Biden said Israel's security can rest in the United States. Well, on the other hand, he says what he says before that. And he's telling Netanyahu that they must change. And the subheadline was Israel losing global support. And again, that question that I've used for so many years in this business, what are we watching happen? What are you watching happen? The reports in this country on the rise of anti-Semitic activities after October the 7th are incredible. More than 2,000 incidences have been reported in our country since the Hamas massacre and it's a 337% increase. 303-696-1971. Why? The world is turning against Israel's war in Gaza. And many, many people, I think a lot of people in this country don't understand why. Why, I guess is my question to you. Why? 303-696-1971, the perspective in the Arab world, if you read Al Jazeera, is quite different. The perspective in Europe is somewhat different. And in this country, I can't get a read on, I couldn't find any numbers, maybe Billy can, on showing where the support for Israel is in our nation today. So first of all, good morning. George is off. I'm Peter Boyles. Get to come back in here and do the job. 303-696-1971. There's nobody on the lines, and so get ready. It'll be banked up here pretty soon. So if you have something to say, you make sure you want to get in. The world is turning against the state of Israel, but along with that, the attacks on Jews around the world, and that part of it is, it raises its ugly head again. And since I've had the chance to come in and work, I did get the opportunity, as everyone did, to watch the heads of those Ivy League schools. They were stumped. And watching people who come out of this And you would think that, and this is what's made this great switch, Ivy League schools were at one time the bastion of radical liberal thought. And particularly in the 60s, people like Herbert Marcuse and others who were teaching radicalizes education against the war in Southeast Asia, against Lyndon Johnson, against Richard Nixon. And okay, so this is a total, well, is it a total switch? I certainly believe it is. But now, looking at those three women, and some of them are now gone, but not even, they're heads of Ivy League universities, simply unable to give a clear answer to, and part of that is, and I think from some other reading I did, they have to go back and face faculty, they have to go back and face student bodies that have already been radicalized in terms of the state of Israel or the war or the perspective in the Middle East crisis. So 303-696-1971. Dick Wadhams is coming up on a radio show this morning. That letter that Dave Williams sent out about Kristi Burton Brown. And I'll also bounce off his thoughts about Rudolph Giuliani. I follow that quite close. Many times, you watch this, Giuliani in his performances. And after all of his talk, and again, we've talked about this many times, all these guys somehow can't wait to get into court. I can't wait to get into court. Really? Well, there's going to be a lot of that's going to be happening here locally as well. I can't wait. Okay, let's see what happens when the Turk comes. But Giuliani in the street the day before he's to testify and what they did to those two poor women. I can't wait to get on the stand. I can't wait to do this. And he bombs them again outside the courthouse. Yesterday comes, Giuliani pulls out. And it's only, I think it's a question of time that Giuliani will also join the Kraken and Jenna Ellis, and as they all start to roll over about Donald Trump. But we'll see what happens. Giuliani is a sad case. And one time America's mayor, and now he's I don't know, he's a caricature of himself. And someone once said that they'll find him in a hotel room. That the housekeepers will come and open the door, and he'll be in there. He'll be gone. And I don't think there's a doubt in my mind he's clearly alcoholic. But it's, again, as we know about RICOing, and we can talk about this as well. Whoever makes the first deal first gets the best deal. And that was Jenna Ellis. No, excuse me, that was the Kraken, Sidney Powell. She rolled first. I'm sure she has good legal advice. And so she gets the best deal. And I think probably the next, well, it's hard to know who gets the best deal. But it looks like Jenna got it. Or Peter, once again, looks like the Kraken got the best deal. And you got to think those guys like John Eastman, they're out there, they're thinking about it. Eastman, of course, waiting for some time for the California board that governs the Bar Association to say, this is what we're going to do with you. And he's already been part of a RICO count in Atlanta. And these guys are going to play, let's make a deal. It's like organized crime. Sammy Gravano, the bull killed 18, 19 people, but he made the RICO deal. And so will the rest. So watching this stuff, you can drop into that if you want, but this is day 70. This is day 70. I go back to October 7th, and it begins. But again, how many people can do the why? How does this end? The Israelis can't stay. You become apparently you could stay, but you can't. You can't stay. And it looks like the Palestinians on the West Bank are turning against Mahmoud, because apparently he's holding, and that's more the Brotherhood, but they're holding out against. Well, they want. I think on West Bank Palestinians, sounds to me, want in. So, what a cabal. and we look at what's going on in the world, what people are saying, then our very own Joe Biden. Joe Biden's saying that Netanyahu must change, and his subheadline was, Israel is losing global support. So I ask you why. Biden, again, he's so unpredictable because he says something that will contradict something the next day. But Biden has been telling, he's been telling Netanyahu to change. How do you change? How do you make a change? And what is the war aim? You can't pound them into the ground. And Bill, we got lights. So protesters in the United States have organized demonstrations for a ceasefire in Gaza. And right across, I guess, a number of major cities. Says, oh, somebody's on the line already. I apologize. Folks are on the phones already. 52 will be the high today, 58 on Saturday. Let's begin. We have a line open. This is Ralph. Ralph, you're first out of the box. Good morning. Thank you.
Well, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Peter, the question is writ small, writ large. Writ small, we've done away with the death penalty. Writ large, we've done away with waging real war on an international scale. Think about the wars the United States has won. Think about the wars the United States has lost. The wars that we fought as a total war, we won. Problem with Israel is it wants to fight a total war in a world that doesn't accept total war anymore.
Well, there is something called, and I'm sure you've called before, and I know you're ahead of the game, but there is something called wars of national liberation, so-called third world. And nobody, the French, the Japanese, nobody could beat those Southeast Asians. They were determined. And when you get in that situation, if you read Gap and you read what these guys were saying, Mao was saying it, that we don't have to win, we just can't lose. And so whether it's the British in Kenya, the British in Ireland, the United States in Afghanistan, the Soviets in Afghanistan, the British in Afghanistan, the Russians in Afghanistan, not the Soviets, but Russians, the time of the Romanovs. And in those protracted third world guerrilla fights, the colonizer, the major power, inevitably will lose. And that's why I ask, do you think that the Israelis can actually stay? And what is the war aim of Netanyahu?
Peter, I don't want to get into a fight with you.
That's okay.
But that is a very, historically speaking, nearsighted view.
Well, it's the truth, though.
No. There have been wars of national liberation going back to the dawn of time.
No, I understand that, but I'm talking about post-World War II.
Precisely my point.
Well, show me where the colonial stays.
Well, the colonials have all given up to international pressure.
No, many times they got booted out on their rear ends.
They got booted out because they didn't do what some of their generals wanted to do.
Which was what?
And I can give you chapter and verse. Well, I'll go with my war, Vietnam, LeMay.
Ooh.
If we kill enough of them, they'll quit fighting.
That's what he said about the Japanese. I'm just finishing a book that LeMay also said.
He said if we bomb and burn enough of them, they'll surrender. You're right, though. I did misquote him on Vietnam.
Yeah.
If we kill enough of them, they'll quit coming from the north to the south. And the question basically is, if you look at where there have been, quote, wars of national liberation, and let's take Masada in Palestine as an example. That was a Jewish war of national liberation against the Roman Empire.
Yes.
They lost.
And what happened? They all died.
Well, they got exterminated is the bottom line on it.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying.
And that all the only point I'm making is, if you're going to say that we have to fight by rules that say no one can exterminate anyone else,
Ralph, I'm not saying
then
that.
Of course they win.
Ralph, I'm not saying that. First of all, the Roman Empire eventually just goes home to be replaced by another empire, to be replaced by the Ottomans, to be replaced by the British. That part of the world, aka the Middle East. And you know why? You know, this is interesting from my reading. Do you know why we say the Middle East?
No.
It's from
Levant, I thought it was.
It's what? No.
Levant. The old term.
No, it comes from the British Empire, the colonial empire. The Near East, the Middle East, and the Far East. We still use the terms of the Imperial British. Well, they're military, they're colonials, they're home, but the Near East, and then here's the Middle East, and then the Far East. And so we still use British colonial terms to describe that part of the world. And everybody goes home. That's that, the Afghan perspective. And so I love your calls. And so how does this end? And successful wars have aims, by the way. If you ask Lyndon Johnson what his war aim was in Southeast Asia, he couldn't give it to you. Same thing with Nixon. That's why when we lose Kissinger recently, Kissinger wasn't who he was being portrayed. But same thing that happened in Iraq, same thing that happened. Afghanistan is my perfect model. Everybody that goes into Afghanistan leaves. So how does this, Ralph, like I said, I love your mind. How does this end? Because I don't think it does.
Well, it doesn't. What happens is, and the same thing is going to happen in Ukraine, different way, but it's going to be a eventual ceasefire in place. Tough for all the grunts that got killed. But fundamentally, Hamas will still have a toehold in the Middle East.
Always more popular now than ever before. Palestinian, the
absolutely.
rise. There are 90% of Palestinians support Hamas.
Oh yeah. Well, but the thing about it, George, is look, what you're doing is you're saying to pick whatever the occupier is. Don't fight a total war. Fight a limited war. Don't really blow hell out of Gaza, but try not to kill too many civilians.
Yeah, it's a little too late.
You're tying, well, yeah, I know, but you're tying the occupying force's hands behind its back. That you either have a goal that says total victory, or you have a goal that says, well, eventually we're going to reach a political solution.
I'm not so sure. I'm finishing this. Well, there's a new book on the Cold War that's really lengthy. I'm taking my time with it. But they make the point that during the time of the Nazis, their way of controlling an overrun country was to exterminate. The British played another role. The multinationals yet play another role. But what I'm watching right now, and this is there has to be an end game. That's what makes Kissinger in many ways so despicable about the end of Southeast Asia. But they also knew that it was at that point a lost cause. Same thing happens to Bush and Cheney. They lie their way into Iraq. And how do you get out of that? So how does the Israelis, or Netanyahu, if he's still on the job, how do you end this? And these aren't the Germans in 1945.
No, but you wait, and well, how shall I say? How do you end this? The same way it's going to end in the Ukraine. It's when the how shall I say, the economics and politics of continuing to support a limited war dry up.
See, but I differ because Ukraine is a nation state.
No. Hear me. Understand. I use that as an example. I'm saying it's going to be the old traditional ceasefire in place. There's not going to be an elimination of Ukraine by the Russians.
No, because it's always been, again, historically, before the time of the Romanovs, Russians and Ukrainians have clashed. And it's one of those traditional I hate you, you hate me. But there's another factor in this. It was the NATO factor. There's Putin, but it's a nation state. And
agreed. No
Hamas,
question. No question.
Hamas or the rest were not. Take a last comment. This is a wonderful call. Great way to start the show. Last comment,
Okay.
if you would.
Yeah,
if you would.
let me go with Ukraine. Yes, you are correct. They have been at each other's throats, but also look at the demographic line in what we call Ukraine, and put on one side of the line the people who are predominantly Russian, and put on the other side of the line the ones who are Ukrainian. They are mixed along that current border, or how shall I say, more or less along the current dividing line between the armed forces. That's where the ceasefire line is going to end up being.
We will see, because I had this conversation with somebody a couple of days ago, really good conversation. This what we're watching in Ukraine right now, a lot of it goes back to wanting to join NATO and move NATO forces, which was exactly what Jack Kennedy saw in Cuba. They're on our back door. And if you know all the Russian leaders from Peter the Great, certainly to Stalin and to Khrushchev, that fear. And one of the things that Joseph Stalin said, I'm talking about the Germans, and it's at Potsdam, and Harry Truman's meeting him for the first time. And they're talking about what we should do to the nation state. And Stalin says, twice in my lifetime, they've come for us. Let them unify, let them rearm, and they will be back at our throats again. The Germans. And it's really interesting. So the Ukrainians have been through the eyes of the old Soviet Union, or through the eyes of, Peter the Great, it doesn't matter. They've seen them as who they are, and the Ukrainians have seen Russians who they are. Last comment, if you would.
No, you are absolutely right. And that's the thing, that you have the eventual line of ceasefire. I call it ceasefire. They'll call it something more politically correct. But you have the ultimate line of ceasefire, again, more or less following the demographics, even if you have to have people move from north to south like they did in Vietnam.
Sure. No, I mean, everything you say is, history, again, repeats itself. I love your calls, Ralph, and listen to you every once in a while on other shows, man. Someday we meet. You're the man. Thanks for your time. All right, everybody.
You too.
All right. 303-696-1971. To the wall, email or flying, according to Max Boot. I've read Max Boot. Rebel insurgencies cannot succeed without outside support. Hamas cannot succeed without Iran. Of course, this doesn't end, but Netanyahu clearly stated the war aim is destroy Hamas and control Gaza. Huntington was right. Islam is the conflict on international borders. You can't stay. That's the other part of where this is. And I haven't been able to define a war aim other than we are going to destroy them. And it doesn't end good. 52 will be the high. Billy Thorpe, Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS. Thank you.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Say goodbye to clutter and hello to convenience when you experience organization transformation in your home. Roll 'em Out Shelves, your clutter transformation experts, create affordable Colorado-crafted organized storage solutions. These custom options will maximize and organize your kitchen and bath storage as Roll 'em Out Shelves carefully designs and builds roll-out drawers to fit your space perfectly to clear the clutter. Contact owners Joyce and Brent at Roll 'em Out Shelves to schedule your free in-home estimate today.
Morning, everyone. It is the December 15th edition, 710 KNUS with Peter Boyles in for George. I'll be back here tomorrow morning on Saturday at 9. It's Friday morning, the 15th of December. 52 will be the high. 58 on Saturday, Sunday, 60 degrees. 303-696-1971. I think all lines were open. We had people on the lines, and we hit a spot break, and people drop off. I know it's early in the morning. If you'd like to come back, 303-696-1971. We are talking about the world turning against Israel, including the President of the United States, Joe Biden. And Biden is doing it in this very Joe Biden-esque way, but the international outcry, someone has written about 4 or 5 days ago, they're now talking about the death toll in Gaza. And Joe Biden said yesterday, in fact, that he wants the Israelis to focus on saving civilian lives. And back to the last caller, how must one do that? And Benjamin Netanyahu said he told U.S. Security Advisor Jake Sullivan that Israel will continue its fight against Hamas, and this is the war aim until absolute victory. Well, what does that look like? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that historians go, no, you don't get to do this. And really good military leaders demand a war aim. If you know what happened during Bush's invasions, that a lot of full colonels and brigadier generals, major generals, other civilians in Defense Department would go in and tell Rumsfeld, tell many of those men that were in charge of that brain trust with George Bush, you can't do this. Well, what happened to them? Well, they lost their jobs. And when you get in a room with somebody and nobody wants to listen to someone saying it's wrong, then you're in trouble. About half of the air-to-ground munitions that Israel has used in Gaza have been unguided, I'm reading this, otherwise known as dumb bombs. And there's this whole thing about Willie Pete, about phosphorus. And CNN has given, and again, you watch all these different guys. You can watch English Al Jazeera, you can watch ABC, NBC, you can get on the internet and do a lot of reading, but I watch this. So this is the 70th day of the war. And how does this end? What does an end look like? Remember, if you can't give a war aim, then there's many great, brilliant historians say, then you should not go to war. FDR had a clear vision. It was before, 2 days go by and the Germans declare war on the United States, but it was the destruction of the Empire of Japan. Mr. Lincoln's war aim was what? Keep the country unified. And, slavery was somewhere down the list for Abraham Lincoln, but the unification of the country, that was his war aim. It was successful. World War I had really no aim, and look what came out of it. And you look again and again and again. What is the war aim for the Israelis? And this launch of destroy Hamas is, how can it be destroyed? In fact, it's strengthened with a death toll. And if you read the West Bank, if you think of Israel kind of like shaped like Mr. Peanut, is the way, a north-south run. And on the side towards the water is Gaza. On the other side is the West Bank. And so Israel, that's where Mr. Peanut kind of thins down in the middle. But Gaza is not big. Gaza is, I don't know, I think it's like 25 or 27 miles long and, 5 miles wide. That's not much. And all of these people were packed in there and, people are going to die. And so the world now goes after everybody. And the other part of this, which I really find interesting, is the rise of anti-Semitism in this country as well as Europe. I mean, it's like what happened to the Japanese. If you think about history, the Empire of Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. And although those men and women and children they were called the Nisei, the second generation, they were extremely loyal to this country. In fact, it's the legendary 4-4 Deuce that goes to Europe. It's every one of those guys, practically every one of them, was a Japanese soldier. I think one of the most highly decorated units of the Second World War. But they put those people in camps. They rounded them up. General DeWitt, and the governor at the time was Warren Harding. Warren Harding was Earl Warren. Come on, Peter. And Earl Warren was the governor of California when the proclamation came down to round up Japanese. A sidebar to that, a lot of people don't know, they also rounded up some Germans and rounded up some Italians too, but not to the extent that they did to the Japanese. So the Japanese end up, in Wyoming, different camps. And in many ways, you have this internal enemy. So, and they weren't. So inside of all of this lies what? I don't see I don't see how this can end. And each and every time someone in Gaza is killed, and as we used to read about, they called it the 2-for-1 sale. I kill you. Your father, your brothers, your cousins are going to come back and kill me. So I kill one. And the same thing happened in Afghanistan. That was, again, once again, George Bush shouldn't even be mentioned. But what they did is they had a huge 2-for-1 sale. And it goes on. So the death toll in Gaza, I don't know what would be the even accurate number, simply because how they portray it. But coming back to this, the unprecedented rise in anti-Semitic incidences in the United States of America since October the 7th skyrockets. And so this is, again, back to the notion, well, these are Japanese. They just attacked Pearl Harbor, even though they were born in this country, and they love America. It doesn't matter because they're Japanese. Is it that, or is it, again, you're Jewish, and so subsequently you're obviously, an Israeli, obviously a Zionist, obviously responsible for what's taking place right now in Gaza. And obviously it's the same thing, round the Japanese up. Why? Well, the Japanese just attacked Pearl Harbor. They're to blame for it. And so they went into the camps. So these unprecedented rise in anti-Semitic incidences, according to my reading last night, more than 2,000 incidences have been reported in our country since the Hamas massacre. It is a 337% increase. And since the Hamas attacks in Israel on October the 7th, the anti-Semitic incidences have reached, and even in Europe, it's worse. And again, if you read Drudge this morning, they broke up a ring of people from that part of the world living in Europe, getting ready to begin to attack. So how do you do this, and what do you do with this? Back to the wall again. Pete, what is unclear about what Netanyahu stated war aims? Historically, the Israelites have met their war aims, but this is I think, with respect, I think it's a great text. 48 was the war for, again, creation of the state. The 67 war, there's Passover war, there's Suez crisis. I mean, there's invasion of Lebanon stuff. It just goes on. But this is, now they're in Gaza, and the world has gone and is going the other way. The courts in Netherlands ruling today, there's all these different things happening. And if you read this, this does not bode well for the Israelis. And how does Netanyahu somehow try and make this right? And I don't think I don't believe that he will remain in office, but he's now a wartime leader. Wartime presidents or wartime leaders are quite different than peace in a time of peace or a time of tranquility. But when you get a wartime leader, if you look historically, Lincoln was a great wartime leader. FDR was a great wartime leader. Lyndon Johnson was horrible. Richard Nixon was, there's not words. George Bush and Dick Cheney, the only thing that would ever make Nixon look good would be George Bush and Dick Cheney. So what is the aim of this war? And they got to be sitting and asking themselves, here we are on the 70th day. How much longer does it go? And with Biden, and again, you wonder, well, Joe, remember Joe's great line, I just want to go to bed. But he's the president of the United States, arguably the POTUS. He said on Tuesday that Israel is losing support over its indiscriminate bombing of Gaza and that Netanyahu should change. And it's a rift in the relationship of the country. To the wall again. We talked about this earlier. 90% of Palestinians support Hamas, a terrorist organization. There should not be no two-state solution. In fact, again, this is something that seems to raise the ire of people. Historically, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Michael Collins. I can always come back to Michael Collins. We could put down a list of people. Look what the British would have done had they gotten their hands on John Adams or gotten their hands on General Washington, Thomas Jefferson. Things would have been so much different because how the British saw them. And they were, opposed to the crown. They were all these terrible things that they were. But to us, they certainly, people like John Adams to me, or General Washington, President Washington, they're revered. So how we see them versus how they see them. Remember, overwhelmingly, the German people supported Adolf Hitler. Italians with Benito Mussolini. It's one of the things, again, it's been said by people and written by people that no war philosophically and oftentimes physically, that the most significant thing is to know the enemy. And I think that was lost on so many American presidents. They had no idea. And the notion, we're going to take a break and come back and take calls, the idea that, and if you read Johnson, read Carnot's books, Johnson actually believed that he could deal with Ho Chi Minh or Lee Duc-Tho or any of the leaders, that he could negotiate with them like he's doing for a senator in Nevada to build a dam or to put in power grids or to whatever Lyndon Johnson would do. And he actually believed that he could do that with Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh is thinking in 160 degrees the other way. He is, and again, for some, you look at this stuff, and so it is your turn. It really is a mixed bag. 52 the high today, 58 on Saturday, 60 on Sunday. Dick Wadhams coming up. I want to talk about Rudolph Giuliani with him as well. It is your turn. Back tomorrow at 9, 303-696-1971. Morning, everybody. The 15th of December, 10 days before Christmas 2023. Peter Boyles working for George Brauchler. And I'm back here tomorrow at 9 for our Saturday morning show. 710 KNUS Weather Center weather. It's a good one. 52 the high today. Tomorrow, 58. Get back on a motorcycle. And 60 on Sunday. 303-696-1971. Dick Wadhams on the other side talking about, again, watching internally the outliers in the Republican Party. I'm going to bring up Rudolph Giuliani and watching that, just sadness, absolute sadness. But where's his future? And the other thing I think that's so important to talk about is why this is taking place in the first place. What is the war about? And again, if you take any major conflict, a fellow brought World War II up. World War II, the so-called good war, which truly it was, if there is such a thing as a good war, World War II certainly fills that. Is the answer to that? Is there a good war? Yes. The American Civil War to reunify the nation. So it was a good war. It was horrible, but it was a good war. World War I, no. Southeast Asia, no. Afghanistan, Iraq, of course not. But we walk into these things. So if you read the history of the world, and there's things that just clash, there's been the Shoah in Europe. But prior to that was Balfour Declaration. We've been over it many times. What happens to the Arabs under the British? But the Balfour Declaration, Arthur Balfour, say that again, Peter. Arthur Balfour was the Home Secretary. And he made the deal with Leon Rothschild for money to give the declaration for the return. And here we go again. So after the Second World War, in the Third World, particularly places where the French were the Imperials or the British were, or even the losers were as well, and they would use troops from India, from Pakistan, from sub-Saharan Africa. And when these men get back home, and the same thing happened here in the South. When a Black American GI came back after he helps liberate Europe, and he knows he can't walk in there and have a drink in that bar, then things change. So we'll come back with Dick. It's the world is turning against Israel. So why? We'll pick that up again. 303-696-1971. I'm Peter Boyles for Brauchler. Stay right here. Morning, everybody. 10 days till Christmas. It's December 15th, 2023. I'm Peter Boyles in for George. George has the day off. I'm back here tomorrow morning at 9 to noon on our Saturday show, 710 KNUS Weather Center weather. Beauty, 52 the high today, 58 Saturday, 60 degrees on Sunday. Internally and across the country, Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Welcome back to the radio show. He's a friend. Please say good morning. Welcome back to Dick Wadhams. Hey, Dick, thanks and good morning, and thanks for getting up and coming on the show.
You bet. Good morning, Pete.
Yeah, I would like to begin until we work our way here to Colorado. Is former New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, and standing outside the courthouse the day before yesterday, saying how he wants to go on the stand and he wants to tell the truth about these two women in this Georgia election workers for lying about their work in the 2020 elections. And now the next day, and this is pretty, of the Trump supporters, this is the game they play. What are we seeing with Giuliani, first of all, and what do you think the outcome of that is going to be?
Well, I mean, it looks to me like he's going to be convicted. He's going to lose this case, and he should. I mean, what these women went through, and they're just, from what I can tell, Pete, I mean, they just look like hardworking election workers who somehow ended up in the sights of Giuliani and the Trump stolen election conspiracy machine. And then in terms of Giuliani himself, he just appears he's just losing his mental faculty, Pete. I mean, to go outside of that courtroom and to say those things, like he forgot what just happened.
Well, remember Lindell did that. You wait for this, you wait for this, you wait for this. And of course that turns to sand. Giuliani, now I think the same fate is waiting for Mike Lindell. But Giuliani, who, someone's had a really great line that Rudolph Giuliani of 30 years ago would be prosecuting the Rudolph Giuliani today.
Yes.
I think that was very good. So, I mean, I think, as someone said, someday housekeeping will get in the room in some pretty nice hotel someplace and they'll find him. But what are the odds, and Dick Wadhams is here, what are the odds that Giuliani, or for that matter, Eastman, will roll over, will give it up to Jack Smith or give it up to whomever? You think that happens?
Well, I used to think that would happen with Giuliani, but I'm convinced, Peter, that his mind just isn't working right, and that he's kind of in this la-la land and is not going to, and probably won't come out of it. So I kind of changed my opinion about him rolling over. In terms of Eastman, I mean, I get his emails talking about his being persecuted in California in the disbarment case, and
they're all victims.
And raising money.
They're all victims. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't see him doing it. And of course, he's been hired by the local Republican Party to go to court on the primary law. And so, I don't know.
So, but see, I think Giuliani, his advisors, his lawyers, and I think what happened to the Kraken, and I think it happened to Jenna Ellis, that their lawyers sat them down and said, now look, you face time or you can make a deal. Let's make a deal. And that's, Giuliani knew that stuff. And I always say about Sammy Gravano was the first one, to go against Gotti, and he got, a good deal. And he was responsible he murdered, I think, 17 or 19 people, and, he's free. He's, does a YouTube show. So the Kraken, I think, made the first deal, maybe the best deal. But if somebody like Giuliani or Eastman, I think that, internally, Eastman he's probably the smartest one of all of them. And he makes a deal.
Yeah, I don't. He doesn't sound like it right now, but when the reality catches up to him, he might. And boy, that would be if he caves. Think of what a disappointment that will be to a lot of the Trump crowd.
Yeah, radio talk show host everywhere, right?
Yes.
So again, I'm going to seal this up, but watching Giuliani the day before yesterday out in the street, and I'm thinking, why don't his lawyers, pull him aside and say, knock that off? That he was determined he was going to take the stand and prove why these women were guilty. And then it doesn't happen.
And I bet his lawyers probably did admonish him not to say anything like that. Then he went right out there and did it. So I'm not sure his lawyers can restrain him. I just think he's just not operating with a full deck right now. Doesn't look like to me.
I follow Eastman closely because of our friendship, but he's doing it's the same thing. And this judge will have to make a decision by February on whether or not he keeps his ticket. I'm not so sure they won't move quicker. And now Jack Smith has his eye on has his eye on John Eastman as well. So that's a lot of pressure on those guys.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dick Wadhams is here. Now, I read this letter, the legal letter, explain this whole thing. It starts with Dave Williams. And can you explain this? Do we lose you?
The letter?
Yeah, please.
I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say something else too. I think it's nothing more, Pete, than a blatant attempt to assassinate the character of Kristi Burton Brown, who I know you know well as I do. And I don't think you could find a more honest, ethical person than Kristi Burton Brown. And I don't know what this obsession is that Dave Williams has about his predecessor. I think part of it is that he has been terribly unsuccessful in raising money for the state party since he was elected state chairman, and by doing this, he's conferring blame on her. But I just do not get it, and this letter that they sent to her alleging all kinds of mismanagement of state party finances, and then even suggesting criminal activity, is just reprehensible.
One of the problems that the Republican Party in Colorado has is nobody wants, or seemingly no one wants to donate any money to them. And
no,
is that true?
It is, Pete. I mean, he's raising enough money to keep the headquarters open, and I think he's paying himself now, which is fine. I was a full-time paid chairman, so I can't criticize him on that. But he has no staff. It is a shell operation. In fact, he doesn't have a staff at all. The major donors are not giving to him. They have no confidence in him or the state party from what they've seen with this obsession with stolen election conspiracies. And I'll tell you, this assault on Kristi Burton Brown's integrity is not going to be well received with donors either, because she had developed a relationship. She did get the party financed well when she was state chairman, worked hard at it, had credibility, and this is not going to help him at all. I don't understand why they have picked this fight. Of course, this is all he does is pick fights with other Republicans. That's his whole mission as state chairman.
I have called this a purge. If you historically, and who are they? Who is Dave Williams and his companions? Who are they? They're attempting to purge the Republican Party of the not the true believer. The true believer has to say Donald Trump won. If you don't say that, then you support Joe Biden, or you become the classic RINO. Just by those, no, he did not win. And then, they turn their knives on you. Do you believe that to be true as well?
Oh, my Lord. The Williams and his fellow mega people, they wrap themselves in principle. But as far as I can tell, Pete, the only principle they have is fealty to Donald Trump and the stolen election conspiracy theories that Trump constantly espouses. And if you deviate from that at all, you are a RINO. You are a Republican in name only. And now Kristi Burton Brown, who has been laboring in the Republican trenches since she was 19 years old, frankly, probably earlier when she was a teenager, much younger. Kristi has been as active as anybody know her entire life, but she's a RINO now. And the allegations against her are despicable. You know, Kristi, she used to
Sure.
come on your show regularly, so you got to know her. She is a good person. She's a smart political person. She led the party in a very difficult time when the party went down because of Trump. But no, she needs to be punished, and that's what Dave Williams is trying to do to her right now.
The time, they call it the Turk. The time is coming, and right now Giuliani's the tip of the spear, but Eastman in California, and when Giuliani decided, Dick Wadhams here, Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS, when Giuliani decided not to testify in the defamation case, and the jury is now working on determining how much damages he should pay to those two women of the election workers in Atlanta. And Giuliani's already been found liable, and they're seeking 15.5, and I read 43 million. I don't know what the number is, but and Giuliani could easily end up in prison, because he's facing some other places as well. Donald Trump is what, 92 charges in 4 different cases, whatever it is, against Donald Trump. Eastman, I don't know, but when you again watch criminal charges, watch how RICO worked. It just takes somebody to roll over, and they're beginning to roll over. When we get to that moment, now what? Will it make any difference to the true believer?
No, it won't.
I agree.
They're going to decide that their heroes like Jenna Ellis and others were forced into it, were badgered into it by the federal government, and they will always find another conspiracy behind the conspiracy, Pete. Nothing matters. And of course, every time Trump speaks about that the election was stolen from him, they believe it, and they believe it to their core. So no, I don't think it'll have any impact.
So what does that do to 2024, the national elections, or even locally?
Well, if Trump is our nominee, and by the way, Peter, I always try to give this qualification. I voted for Trump twice. I loved what he did on deregulation, judgeships, on tax policy, immigration. I think Trump was amazingly, he was a successful president, but he has squandered all that with his behavior on January 6th, his insistence the election was stolen from him, and now he has no more credibility. And with voters that might have gravitated towards him, especially here in Colorado, he's not going to win Colorado if he's the nominee. Maybe he'll win the national election. I mean, Biden is so weak, he might become president again, but he's not going to do it here. And he's going to pull down Republicans here because he is so disliked by the voters that we need to win here.
Well, he holds a significant lead. The Iowa caucuses are pending, and he's got over 50% approval, and that's just amongst Republicans. And there seems to be 2 forces at work here. One, he remains extremely popular inside the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And well, then at this point, do the Republicans become lemmings and just go off the cliff? Joe Biden, Dick, it's beyond me to think of Joe Biden even being on the ticket and campaigning, let alone attempting to do a debate. Can you imagine Joe Biden no, I'm serious, in a debate? Because I know. I mean, that's frightening.
Yeah.
And
there won't be any debates, Peter.
No, I don't think so either.
You guys.
No, I don't think so either. What's the great line? If you knew where you're going to die, you would never go there. But I think they're not mandated debates, but can you imagine what anybody on the Republican side could do to Joe Biden? But on the other hand, my friends who are, involved in Democratic politics say the Democrats want Donald Trump on the ticket.
Yes. And Pete, that Wall Street Journal poll last week that showed Trump actually leading Biden by 4 points nationwide, which is not insignificant. That was he'd never been up over Biden by that much. But more importantly, Nikki Haley had a 17-point lead over Biden.
Yeah,
which tells you
that's the point.
That if we nominate somebody other than Trump, Biden will get destroyed.
But I also think. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I also think the power brokers, the movers and shakers of the Democratic Party, and they got to move quick because this is here. We are December of 23. They got to move quick to get Joe, off the throne. They have to make a deal for Kamala someplace, give her the, the presidency of Harvard or something where she belongs. Give her that, and Biden steps aside. But then, then who steps up? But I just don't know. I mean, this is such an amazing moment in American politics, where the two front runners seemingly nobody really wants, and yet
one of the problems, Peter, for Democrats right now is even if they wanted to remove Biden, a lot of state election laws have already expired in terms of getting a name placed on the ballot and in the primaries, and so it would almost take his withdrawal late in the process so that it's kind of an open national convention to nominate a new candidate. Now, I think that's dangerous because I know a lot of people don't believe this, but I think Michelle Obama could easily emerge and blow through that convention.
She has said again and again and again, no interest. But, and in politics, that's meaningless. Dick Wadhams is here. Dick, when you took over the Republican Party in terms of money, it was really in the hole then as well, was it not?
It was, and I knew that when I got elected in 2007, Peter, that the party was several $100,000 in debt, and I wasn't responsible for any of it. I wasn't even in Colorado during the 2006 election cycle, but I accepted the responsibility for getting that debt paid off when I got elected in 2007. And the way I did it was that the major donors of the party, like Bruce Benson and a lot of others, they rallied around me because they knew that it was important. The problem for Dave Williams today is that those major donors have no confidence in him, which is why he's not raising any significant money. And stuff like going after the reputation of Kristi Burton Brown is going to further alienate them. So yeah, we got it paid off. It wasn't fun, believe me, but we got it paid off and raised money for what we needed to do in 2008. But so it was. So yeah, I know what it's like to be there.
It is the life's blood of politics, money.
Yeah.
And if there isn't any money, I don't know what happens next. One more. Does Lauren Boebert survive?
Pete, I think she's in a real bad position. I think she was already highly vulnerable even before the DCPA Beetlejuice incident. I think that was kind of a turning point for her. There's a very strong challenger who just Jeff Hurd from Grand Junction. I think it'll be a competitive primary, but the biggest problem for Lauren Boebert is the general election. Remember, she won by 547 votes in a district that has a 9-point Republican advantage. That same guy is running again. The same Democrat is running again. He's raising money hand over fist. He's got $4.3 million in the bank, as I recall. So I think the general election is really, really hard for her. Primary is competitive, very competitive. So we'll see what happens. But she's kind of worked herself into a real hole right now.
In many ways, it's more contrasting than comparing, but or the other way around perhaps. But watching Rudolph Giuliani's slide into madness and watching this young woman that we went up and we did a radio show in her restaurant and we knew her husband and went out. And then I went to one of the fundraisers for her and she was a gift. I mean, I thought, wow, this woman's got, she's got wheels. And
Peter, she was one of the most dynamic people to ever serve in Congress.
My heavens.
Colorado.
What happened?
No doubt about it.
As Joseph Heller said, something happened. What happened to her?
I think, she became a national celebrity just overnight back in 2020 when she got elected, when she beat a Republican incumbent.
Yeah.
And then she, got elected overall. And I think it's a heady experience. And I just think a lot of people just get totally taken in by it. Now, and we've seen that on both sides of the aisle. And I think she did spend more time trying to get national headlines than working on the concerns of her district. Now, I know her congressional office can point to a lot of things she's done for the district, and I'm sure she has. But the trouble is, Peter, it's hard to see that when all these national headlines are constantly coming, and then this DCPA incident, I think just really took her down to a level that she's in a bad position.
To wrap it up, when we went up, took the radio show to the Rifle, and met her and talked to her, and had breakfast with her, met her husband, and then when she won, I said, this young woman could easily become the governor of Colorado, or a challenge for a Senate seat, and then turns to ashes. And it's sad. It's very, very sad. But boy, she had stroke when she first hit it. She had stroke.
And I'm not counting her out yet totally, because she's a very dynamic campaigner. She's got a very loyal base of support in the Republican Party. Yeah. And it's still a Republican district. But I mean, you just look at those numbers from 2 years ago and think, how did she almost lose that district? 2 years. And it's just, so it's tough. We'll see.
Thank you, Dick. Dick Wadhams, everyone. Thanks for have a good weekend, man. Thank you. All right. 303-696-1971. It is open lines. 52 will be the high, 58 tomorrow. We started the show on the world turning against Israel in the war in Gaza. Do you see what we're watching happen? The world is turning against Israel. If so, then why? Including the things that Joe Biden is saying, but the world in general. So 303-696-1971. You can talk about what Dick just spoke about if you wish, but the significant part of this is the nation state of Israel. And then in our country, and again, this is one of those moments where the reports of the unprecedented rise in anti-Semitic incidences or activity since October the 7th. This is day 70, if you would, of the war. And since Hamas, the massacre in Israel in October 7th, the anti-Semitic incidences reached the highest number of incidences during any 2-month period since 1979 is their base date. Wow, 303-696-1971. And I tried to make the case historically that when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, 7 December 41, and FDR, and with all the intent, they start rounding up Japanese as to blame, they were called Nisei, second generation, and as to say that those men and women and little girls and boys were part of the attack on Pearl. And so they lost their possessions, they lost their property, they were interned in camps for something that the Japanese had done at Pearl Harbor. And mind you, some Germans were rounded up and some Italians were rounded up, but not near the degree of what happened to Japanese. So now we have this war taking place, and yet anti-Semitism in the world, and we've talked about it, why? So 303-696-1971, since the Hamas massacre, October the 7th, the anti-Semitic incidences have reached the highest number of incidences in any 2-month period since 1979. And again, the Israelis what will happen? How does the war end? What is the war aim? And why do you believe the world is turning against Israel? Why do you think the world is now slowly but surely turning against the state? 52 will be the high, 58 tomorrow. Billy, you want to pull the pin? All right. 303. There's nobody on the phones. 303-696-1971. I'm Peter Boyles for George Brauchler. Stay here. 10 days till Christmas, December 15th, 2023, a Friday morning. I'm Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler, back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to do our 9 to noon show. 52 today, 58 tomorrow, motorcycle stuff, 60 on Sunday, 303-696-1971, day 70 of the war in Gaza. And the Gallup poll this morning, Billy just handed it to me. The Gallup poll, Americans, this is dwindling, back Israel's military action in Gaza, 50% to 45%. I mean, in a public opinion poll, I mean, you have this float. A solid majority of Republicans, they say 71% of Republicans, and men 59%, and adults 55 and older, 63%, approve of Israel's military actions in Gaza. Conversely, 6 in 10 Democrats, 63% of Democrats, adults younger than 35, 67%, you see where this goes, and people of color, 64% disapprove or do the, again, slight majority of women at 52%. So there's no meaningful difference really by education, the rest of it. So where do you stand? And again, I'm asking myself, what's the payoff? There has to be a war aim. If you study history, you see that successful wars have an aim, even before it begins. What was von Clausewitz or Lao Tzu or somebody said, it starts before the first, the win will be determined before the first shot is fired. And the largest segment of Americans, 42%, say the U.S. is providing about the right amount of help to the military and to Israel. Another 25% say the U.S. is not doing enough, and it goes from there. So where are you, and what are we watching happen? I mean, I always love questions like that, but and again, in this country, as we brought it up, the unprecedented rise in anti-Semitic incidences in our country, significantly up. And I come back to, and I've now done it twice, but what happened to the Japanese Americans in the beginning of the Second World War. There was a general by the name of DeWitt, and of course, Earl Warren, who later becomes the Supreme Court Justice. Earl Warren, they decided it's okay. Well, actually, Earl Warren at the time is the governor of California, and they're going to begin the roundups. And they did. And I keep thinking about, you take a Jewish American who you don't know his or her politics, but you attack them. No one, I mean, the Japanese Americans, and again, they used that term Nisei, ni being the number 2, ni, and they were unbelievably loyal to the United States of America. Remember the Japanese kids in Boy Scout uniforms and playing ball, and then comes the legendary 4-4 deuce, the go for broke, just an amazing, with a record of bravery in combat in Europe. And some of those guys were interpreters and all kinds of, but there was no incidences of them, yet they caught the jacket. And anti-Semitism is in and of itself. So let's go back to work. Mike, you're on the radio show. Good morning and thank you.
Well, good morning, Mr. Boyles. Hey, I wanted to just spout a little bit about the Middle East.
Sure.
First of all, I think I've told you before, I'm pretty biased, very biased in favor of Israel. I don't think they had any other choice. I don't think they could have turned the other cheek after that attack on October 7th. So the war aim that I understand is to clean out Hamas on the Gaza Strip. The problem is, what do you do afterwards? And, here we are. Are you going to try to do nation building? Are you going to try to run it? If you leave after you wipe out Hamas, who fills the vacuum? Probably won't be good. We'll be back to the same situation again in a few years. And then the other thing that's on the boiler here is that when they're done with Hamas, I think they're signaling pretty strongly they're heading north. They're going to Hezbollah next.
Well, the Israeli army has invaded Lebanon before. When actually the Palestinians, when the Jordanians kicked the Palestinians out, and again it gets to that place where, and this is not Hamas, and this is back to Arafat, and they go to Lebanon. Well, the Lebanese, and they were fermenting in Lebanon, so the Israeli army invades Lebanon to go after them, and that brings the Syrians into the fight because the Syrians also now invade Lebanon. And that's really the beginning of the creation of Hamas. Hamas comes out of the jails in Lebanon, prisons in Lebanon, but after the triple invasion, but again, this point where the war aim, there has to be an aim, and you can't say, I guess you can say, we're going to destroy Hamas. Hamas is a free floating. This isn't destroying Germany or destroying Japan. And that's the problem of the so-called protracted war in the third world. And it's, I don't know what the war aim can be.
Well, I guess I agree. They can certainly, and I do think the aim is to go in there, destroy Hamas, but it's a temporary thing, as you say.
Absolutely.
It's a free-floating ideology that'll pop up again someplace, if not in the same place later on. And so, to your larger point, this is never ending until one side or the other wipes the other out entirely.
And if you read the Pentagon Papers, one of the conclusions was you cannot beat a birth rate. And again, using the aspect of the industrial war, World War II is the classic example where it can be done, but the rest of the time it can't. It doesn't win. Whether it's Ireland or Kenya or Vietnam itself or Afghanistan or you pick them, I'll play them, where it can't be done. And are the Israelis in that situation again? It can't be done because we talked about it earlier. It's been called the 2-for-1 sale. I kill you, your brothers, your dad, your uncles. Now they join up. If I kill them, 4 becomes 8. And what's the model?
The whole situation's just intractable. The Israelis, the Zionists, whatever you want to call them, feel they have a right to be there. And they've had a tremendous history throughout, world history, at least over the last couple thousand years, where, they needed a homeland. So, okay, so they're there. They feel they need to be there. The other side does not want them there, does not feel they have any right to be there. And so they're just going to keep going at it back and forth again until one side either decides they're going to quit or they're gone.
Mike, this is a great call. Have you ever sat down and spent, I don't know, say a month off and on reading the Arab perspective on the Middle East crisis? Have you ever really sat down and read their history, read their beliefs and what they say? Because I think it was Lao Tzu. They said, you better know your enemy. You better know before this thing begins, know who they are. And I mentioned Lyndon Johnson and Ho Chi Minh. Lyndon Johnson, George Bush didn't have an idea. He never cracked a book on Afghanistan. And the Soviets had been driven out of there. And that didn't bother George Bush. And so amid all of these civilian lives and in both Israel and Palestinians, if you look at the root cause of all of that, where do you come up? And have you ever sat down, I apologize asking it again, and read the Arab perspective?
I have not in depth. I have dabbled a little bit.
Okay.
And again, Peter, I am biased in favor of Israel. And so it closes my mind a little bit, if you know what I mean. I don't read as deeply as I should probably, as you have probably.
Well, I got nothing else to do. You got a real life. but,
whatever.
Yeah.
But, it's a valid point. There's always two sides
Well,
to every story.
But in this case, the Palestinians in Gaza, all they have ever known is what they say forced displacement and occupancy, and they almost see themselves as in a I'll say this in terms of what they say, in an outdoor prison. And so now what's going to happen?
Yeah, if I recall correctly, Sinwar, I think is his name, that leads Hamas now.
Yeah.
He grew up in the camps. He's a product of the camps in Gaza there.
Sure.
So to your point, they do feel it's an outdoor prison, I'm sure. I think world opinion, at least the progressive bleeding heart people, agree with that. This world opinion stuff drives me crazy because I think a lot of this now is there's a lot of these people that are into this oppressor versus oppressed, colonizer versus colonized. And Israel is painted as a oppressor and colonizer.
Yeah, it's changed. I mean, it goes from the plucky little kid to now being called colonial masters themselves. Have you ever been yourself? You ever been to Israel?
I have not. It's on the bucket list.
Okay.
Have not.
Well, I'll tell you something really interesting. I had been in Lebanon and I made some friends, and I've talked about this one interview that I got. And so I'm getting ready to leave, and the Lebanese guys I'm with said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Israel." I'm not from that trip to Israel, but we were scheduled to go to Israel. And they said, "Do not let the Israelis stamp your passport." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because then you cannot come back here to see us." So when I got to Israel, and the security at Israeli airports is just amazing, but I was schooled. If you went up, and these guys are really almost in armored booths, when you walk up one at a time to meet them. And I said to the guy, I said, I'm in the media, and I'm going to be back in the Middle East, but most of the countries won't let you in. So he just put a little card inside of my passport. He didn't stamp anything, put the little card in there. He flipped through it, all the different places I had been, but he put the card in, and they were very gracious. I mean, it was not a problem. And so then,
why wouldn't the Lebanese, if you had been stamped, if your passport had been stamped, why wouldn't they have let you come back in? Is it because anybody that's touched Israel can't come back in?
Yes, it's part of that. And the other thing is true. Going to Gaza, you ride or at least I did, you ride in this van with an Israeli driver, and you get to the fence. The Israeli driver gets out, Palestinian driver gets in. You cross. So, I mean, no. It's and that was during a time of very, very little activity. But the Israelis are not going to go back to what, and the Palestinians are not going to go back to what, and here we are. I appreciate your call. Last comment, if you would, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just keep your eyes open, because when this is done, the Israelis are heading north, and they're going to do something with Hezbollah because they've had to abandon. Israel has now had to abandon significant portions of their northern lands or territories because of the threat from missiles from Hezbollah. And so we're in for a long one here. It's going to keep going.
And I would think the last thing on earth that the Israelis would want to do was go into Lebanon. The Lebanese they're a different breed of cat. And first of all, they'll tell you if you think they're Arabs, and they'll say to you, first of all, we are Phoenicians. We're not Arabs. We taught the world the alphabet. We taught the world commerce, all these different things. And they're as clear as a bell, but there are a lot of Christians in Lebanon, and there's also a lot of Muslims in there. And if you read their constitution, it used to, and I don't know how much of it holds now, but if the premier were a Muslim, the mandate, the president had to be a Christian, and vice versa. And after everything came apart and Hezbollah, rises, it's a wonderful country. Lebanon's in trouble. And, I don't know the outcome of that, but wow, they walk into that, then everything goes nuts. Michael, thank you. Really good call.
Hey, thank you.
Sorry. 303-696-1971. Is the world turning? Maybe it's better to ask it as a question. Is the world turning against Israel? If so, why? And again, this unprecedented rise in the attacks on Jews in this country, and those three women, the heads of the Ivy League schools, you saw that. 303-696-1971. Lines are open. It's all Billy Thorpe's. Friday morning, everybody. We're about 45 seconds for the break. So folks on the phones, please stay there. We'll pick you up right outside after the news and the break is over. 710 KNUS, I'm Peter Boyles for George Brauchler. Back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We do 9 to noon on Saturdays. And the setup questions are, I think, speak about what we are watching in the world. And the world is now turning against Israel. It's you can weigh it, you can measure it. And on the other hand, what is the end game for all of this and what happens if it ends or does it end? So everybody hang on, plus the unprecedented rise in attacks on Jews in this country as well as Europe. Stay here. 52 will be the high. We'll take your calls when we come right back on 710 KNUS. And good morning again, everybody. Peter Boyles in for George, and I'll be back here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to do the Saturday show. It is December the 15th, 10 days until Christmas. 52 will be the high today, 58 on Saturday, 60 on Sunday. I believe this morning marks day 70 of the war in Gaza. And we're talking about it in open lines and watching the world turn against Israel. Even, again, why do you believe that is so? And also talking about the rise in anti-Semitic activities, incidences here in the United States as well as Europe. And yesterday, Joe Biden said that he wants Israel to focus on saving civilian lives when asked if he wants Israel to scale back its assaults. Is that even possible? And again, Billy Thorpe found this one. Americans, this is a by and large from Gallup, but it's not that far away from one another. The issues are not that far away from each other. Americans back Israel's military action in Gaza by 50% to 45%. All right, we'll go to the phones, and Jim waited. Hey, man, you really waited. Good morning. Thanks for doing it. You're back on the air. Good morning.
Good morning, Peter. Good hearing you this morning.
Thank you.
It's just so interesting. First of all, I visited Israel in 2018, and my experience was actually we could have taken a bus from Israel to Egypt, and they allowed you to do, and there wasn't a problem at all. So my experience was kind of different from yours. We went to Jordan. We went from Israel right to Jordan to see Petra. And there was no problems at all. Matter of fact, that's where they got most of their tourists. So it was really, everything was wonderful.
Back it up. The Jordanians, although they were one of the great invaders in 48 when the state is proclaimed, but also remember they're Hashemites, and it's a difference as well. But the Jordanians, the king of Jordan, is very wise in terms of he's hated by much of the Arab world simply for what you just stated. The bus you rode, did it stop any time when it went through Gaza, or did it just go? How did that? Because that's interesting. I never heard that before.
No, we actually decided not to take it because the bus to Egypt, because it just didn't work out time wise. But it was available to us. They said they've had no problems. The thing is, they said that it was better if you would fly. Yes. They have flights going into, and they had told us, they said that's an option as well. I think 18 was just a better time. And I think everybody was kind of, I guess, looser and more agreeable that tourism is a much better way to go to bolster everybody's economy, the Middle East, from that point of view, and they were all open to it.
Oh, I mean, it's the same thing. When we were in Egypt, they had been killing they had been killing tourists, and it was the Brotherhood and other like-minded organizations. So tourists stayed away, and when we were there, you could go almost any place and never have any problem getting in. And now it's reversed; it's come back. Remember, it goes from, and so I think you're right. I think there's a give and take, but boy, my experience was totally different. And
we actually even went into Bethlehem and all that.
Oh, sure,
we had a great time.
Yeah.
The funny, and right now, where I don't know if you keep with touch with Father Andre, the few Christians that are left, they're struggling because that's the only thing they have is tourism to survive with. They're not in the government at all, on the West Bank and stuff like that. And we're helping them out concerning that because they're, we just want to keep the presence of the Christians.
Yeah, the Palestinians, there's actually in the Arab world, there are some Christians, we've talked about it. Tariq Aziz, he was the right-hand man for Saddam. He was a Christian. In Lebanon, they're Maronites, principally Maronites, but there are also other divisions in Christianity. And if you again reading that history, when Lebanon is the front door and the back door for the Middle East, everybody comes through. When the first crusade shows up. They start murdering Lebs as they murder everybody on the way, and they have to stop them and say, no, we are Christians. And as I said earlier, I read their constitution, and it's been a while, but if the premier was a Muslim, the president had to be a Christian rather, and vice versa. But and that's now, on its way to being, or if it isn't, destroyed.
Well, I think, when you look at the history, you see how Lebanon got unstable was the influx of all the Palestinian refugees there.
Oh, no, the other way around.
With that messed it up.
The other way around. When the Palestinians come, that begins the Great War. And that made Lebanon unstable as a result of all the Palestinian. That's what I was saying. Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
As a result of that, that switched the power because it was well dispersed between Christians and Muslims. Absolutely. And when you had all those Palestinians going there, now you shifted things.
And again, when the Palestinians come, then the Israelis come in after them, and so the Syrians invade as well. So they tore the country apart. And I actually, when I was there, I was taken into I was at a Lebanese university because Andre knew these people, and so this very unassuming. I had lunch with everybody, and they were just great, and they were monks and brothers and everything. And I said, "I want to show you our room." And I said, "Okay." So we go into, it's like a classroom. And I don't know what to say. He said, "In this room, Sadat met Henry Kissinger." I thought, wow,
it's amazing.
And when those kids were young kids, I mean, the United States is shelling off the coast, and Lebanon's a beautiful place. It really is, and it's. But now, it
was the Paris of the Middle East. They used to call it.
Absolutely was. Very good call. Boy, the calls this morning have been wonderful. Take care, Jim. Thanks for your time, brother. Thank you. Billy, where do we go over here next? Is that Brandon? Are we good on that? Brandon? Hey, Brandon, you're on a radio show, man. Good morning. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Peter Boyles. Good show as always.
Thank you.
Covering for George. Three things here: the history of war, the history of dominance, and this is the youngest of the three I'll mention: the history of humanitarian aid. Oh my goodness.
Okay.
So here's the thing. Israel has a long history, as do all that area of the world, long history. And the thing is this is a 21st century situation. But that country, Israel, and some of the other places mentioned, but I'll go to the Trojans and ancient Rome and all that. First of all, war used to be off the grid. Even the Civil War, you're not fighting in where the civilians, women and children, they'll be fighting way somewhere where everybody else isn't. They would agree, we'll meet here.
But can I interrupt and add one thing? Because one of the things that broke the back of the Confederacy was what happened in Atlanta.
There you go.
And when they burned the city.
There you go. That was one of the first times where it became, kind of integrated. And you got women and children and everybody, and everyone knows from the old world to the new world, the warriors would go off and fight somewhere else, and then, whatever happens, and then, come back, whoever comes back home, come back to the village, come back to the tribe. But now we got, everything is mixed. So that's one thing Israel's dealing with, because their history probably says, go in there, clean them out, the strongest side wins, obliteration. And but they can't quite do that because we got the media, we got all this stuff going on, we got all kind of video. So Israel, they can't operate the way they would have operated.
There's a line through history that in essence you just said is called might, M-I-G-H-T. Might makes right, and we know that isn't true. Although it is certainly, in a physical sense, very true, but in a philosophical sense, it's a failure. That if, because you have better and bigger and more, and you can invade Poland, 1939, September 1st, 39, you can invade Poland. because you got Stukas and Panzers and everything, but that didn't make it right. But might will make right, and it's a theme through history. And so
Israel's dealing with that. That's an old culture, so they're dealing with different ideologies, and they're fighting this war in the 21st century.
But Brendan,
the long game?
How does
the long game matters?
Well, there is a long game, and you're right.
There you go.
And in that side, the long game was Ho Chi Minh in Southeast Asia. There's different places. They play the long game. They know this is part of this. When you read those guys, they'll tell you you're going to go home. Whether you're a Soviet in the Soviets or the Americans in Afghanistan, both ended the same way. You went home, and this mindset is well known. And they say, and I've said this earlier this morning, you don't have to lose. I mean, you don't have to win. Just don't lose. And and so if you bleed these people long enough, they're going to go home.
See, and it's like it's siege situations. There's all kind of different types of war, but in Israel is a culture. They know all this. The history's there, but they're dealing with some things now in terms of the media, the humanitarian aid. People want to go in simultaneously. All this, it's tough.
Why?
It's tough right now.
Brandon, why do you think the opinion of the world, or does it matter? The world is turning against Israel. You can weigh and measure it. If so, why?
Well, someone mentioned earlier the oppressed thing. I mean, I think that's what the Americans did out west with the Cree, with the Indians and all that. Sure. I mean, the natives, I mean, it's the same thing. It's a dominant thing, and someone's going to get their boot, someone's going to get the boot pressed and surrender, right? So it's a classic. This is classic, but people don't expect this. So that's what we're dealing with is you got folks who've never seen war, never been close to war, commenting and feeling a certain way, help the deer, help the homeless, don't do war, everybody be nice. And it's like, society is not nice.
Yeah,
it's never been.
Yeah, and we both know that isn't true. It doesn't hold up.
That's right.
And I don't know what the outcome is. And the Israelis, they cannot stay. That will make it worse. And then that's the setup that Bush and Cheney put all the GIs in places like Sadr City. You can't stay. The Soviets learned it. The Americans should have learned it. You can't, if you do. And the other part of it is, and it comes out of the Pentagon Papers, you can't beat a birth rate. So
there you go. And Israel knows their stories in that culture where they've just completely killed everyone. And if they were getting advised by ancient people in their own culture, you would have to wipe it clean. No one would like that. No one's advising that, but you can't do it. It's unacceptable today. But that is what the the Spartans would say. You go in there, kill them all, take over the land, and then intermarriage and all that, and just take over.
But there were the moments of invaders. You read about invasions themselves. Oftentimes, the invader then becomes, as you point out, culturalized over several generations. I had a sidebar to this. I had my DNA stuff done, and we're a bunch of mix, and then there's a strain in there that was like they weren't sure about. It was like Laplanders or something. Laplanders, and I called somebody that I have respect for as a good Irish historian, and I said, "Where does this come from?" And he said, "The invaders, the Vikings." No, truly, and it's still no. I'm Brennan, brother, man. I mean, and so I called all my relatives to tell them, "Hey, guess what? We're part." But it comes from the Vikings, who are the Northmen, who they don't always come out of Norway. They come from different places, and showed up in Ireland, and the rest is history. So I get that. That's another wonderful call, man. Well thought out. Right. Thank you for your time, man. Thank you. So Billy, are we pausing, Billy? Do you want to keep rolling? All right. We have one line open, 303-696-1971. Friday morning, I'm Peter Boyles, back here tomorrow morning at 9. Billy Thorpe's got the con. George is be back Monday. 52 will be the high today, and Saturday 58. Get a motorcycle ride out of that. And Sunday it's going to be 60 degrees. Get a motorcycle ride out of that. The world turning against Israel. This is day 70 of the war. Stay here.
Say goodbye to clutter and hello to convenience when you experience organization transformation in your home. Roll 'em out shelves, your clutter transformation experts create affordable Colorado crafted organized storage solutions. These custom options will maximize and organize your kitchen and bath storage as Roll 'em out shelves carefully designs and builds roll out drawers to fit your space perfectly to clear the clutter. Contact owners Joyce and Brent at Roll 'em out shelves to schedule your free in-home estimate today.
And good morning again, everyone. December 15th, Peter Boyles in for George. George Brauchler back on Monday. 52 the high today, 58 Saturday, and 60 on Sunday. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. here on 710 KNUS. We go back to the phones. This time we go to Jim. There's a line open, 303-696-1971. Jim, good morning.
Hey, good morning, mister, and Merry Christmas.
Hey, man, thank you.
Hey, so, over history, as the Jews have been moved into the Palestinian region over and over again, there's been great debate. And I read an article about Churchill around the World War I time frame. Yeah. And Churchill was very concise. He was a heck of a guy. He specifically said, even though the Palestinians have been there for far longer, right? And there's controversy even in that statement. But he specifically said, even though the dog has been in the manger, we're not going to turn the manger over to the dog.
But again, in that time period, there was the Ottoman Empire was running it. And seemingly, from my reading, people got along under the Ottomans. The Ottomans, that whole time period it's just really interesting. But historically, it's been one empire after another running that same area. But it really gets down to, this is like 100 years ago, but Britain then had a foreign secretary by the name of Arthur Balfour. And Balfour's letter to, again, Lionel Rothschild, who's a figurehead in the British Jewish community, powerful money. Money exchanged hands. The British government's going broke in the First World War, and Balfour establishes Palestine, the home, if you would, for Jewish people, and as if he had the right to do it. And that's how we were talking about, have you ever read the Arab Perspective? And the Arabs say, you had no right to do that. And so what goes on from there is when after Balfour Declaration, then comes the British Mandate, that lasted until I think 48. But in that period, the world got to see what's called the Shoah, what not Nazism did, and it changes everything. But the Palestinians and other Arabs see it this way, and you see it that way, and the question is. And somebody asked me, Rodeo Doc's my guy, about where do the Israelis go home to? The Israelis leave Gaza and go back to Israel is where they would go back. So if you look at it historically, but I tell you, Jim, they know their history. I mean, I think most people in this country don't even know our history of the United States.
Correct.
These guys, I mean, the guys that I've met, their grandmothers and grandfathers taught them. And their schools teach them.
It's land they've been fighting for forever. I think we should be thankful that the Native Americans are staying on their reservations, and they don't have a religion that makes them go out and try and do things the way the Palestinians have. These Palestinians, on their reservations, they're not satisfied. And even Lawrence of Arabia, when World War I came around, they had to try and establish those lands down there so that they got the people down there, the Palestinians, and the people in those regions to fight on the side of Arabs. Britain and France.
Yeah, that was the
they promised the Palestinian homeland during that period of time as well. And then Lawrence had to go down there and play stupid and basically tell him we didn't mean it. We're continuing with this land.
Lawrence is so ashamed. I'm a Lawrence fan. That
he was.
He leaves in Damascus. You would think he left, but he left out of Damascus, and he had realized that the double cross had happened, and the Arabs were not going to get what they had promised. Is we'll leave you alone. The Ottomans had run it. And, in fact, it turns out to be the British will now run it and the French will now run it. And I don't know how much shame there are historians that believe that Lawrence was in on it. I have trouble with that. But when Lawrence leaves Damascus, and because he sees the French army coming in, and then the French turn around and give it to the British, as though you as though you can give another country away to another country.
You know what? Just the statement calling the Palestinians dogs, and they're not going to give the manger away to the dogs, just shows you exactly how different people in different places on this planet are meaningless.
And Churchill has more than his fair share of problems. His finest hour is, of course, begins when the Blitz begins, or taking the government over from Chamberlain. And he really, but in the end, when they get to Yalta, or even to Potsdam, remember, he's out of office. Clement Attlee is now is now taking over the prime minister's job, and Stalin and in the end of FDR's life, they shun him. They're not going to, and FDR knows he's not going to. He's realized that some of the stuff that Churchill pulled him into was to keep the empire intact. And then by 47, 48, 49, the British are losing their empire. They're losing Pakistan. They're losing India. And the places that they stood, like Kenya, they eventually lost Kenya. They lost sub-Saharan Africa. So it's this one. It's a giant history lesson. But the British Mandate that created, it was in 1923, and but when the world wakes up and they see the horribleness of the camps, and they see the truth, and after the Nuremberg trials, and there's a shame based, we didn't do anything about it. And
if nothing else, Pete, history is entertaining. Native Americans here in this country are on reservations, and we European patriots can go and purchase cars out of vending machines, right, sitting next to the highway. So it's a wonderful place we live in, and very entertaining.
Great call. Thank you.
Take care, Pete. Have a great Christmas.
All right, man. 303-696-1971. The lines are open again. Great calls this morning. Got a smart audience. Friday morning, the 15th of December, 52 the high, 58 tomorrow, 60 on Sunday. We're back here again tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. The polling data, which I think is interesting too, Billy, I looked at some stuff last night. Billy pulled some polls up. But one of the things when you read the Palestinian polling numbers, the Joe Biden was talking about the so-called, the two-state solution. And, you wonder what Joe Biden's even doing, but they're calling for the West Bank, and it's called the Palestinian Authority, the PA, and eventually to assume control of Gaza. Well, if you go on the West Bank and look at numbers, Palestinians on the West Bank, they want nothing to do with, and he's president is Mahmoud Abbas, and by nearly 90% saying Mahmoud should resign. And, they want a hunk of this war. You can almost bet that. And I don't know how this ends. Does it end as it began, which is what I do believe, that it will return to what? The Israelis can't stay. The Israelis must go back to Israel. And if they do, then what? Again, my pal says if the Israelis go home and leave Gaza, then Pete, what are they to do with from the river to the sea? From the river to the sea, that notion has been with them forever, bent on the destruction of the state. But if you go into Gaza and do what the Israelis are doing now, you can't stay. You have to finish a job, which I can't see. How do you finish Hamas? You don't. If you look at reading the history of, like, for instance, there's PLO, there's Black September, there's Al-Fatah, there's organization after organization, Hezbollah, another organization. They come with the psychological anger that dominates it, whether they show up in the form of Al-Fatah or they show up as Hamas. The mission is the same. The thought process is the same. And I don't know if you beat it. I really don't. Because it's that the spirit perhaps is a good way. Volkgeist, it's going to stay there. And maybe they don't make peace. Maybe much like the United States and the Soviet Union back when I'm a kid in the Cold War, it takes the implosion of Soviet Union, although it begins with Ronald Reagan and the Pope and Margaret Thatcher, but it's coming to an end. And when it comes to an end, then the deal is struck. All right, it is 8:37, 23 before the hour. You ready, Billy? 303-696-1971. Jump in the show if you're getting a busy signal, 303-696-1971. The world is turning against Israel. If so, why do you think that's true? A lot of it is alternative media. As we see the diminishment of the networks and newspapers and mainstream stuff, and underneath it comes, on the internet, other places, alternative press. And why do you think, and again, watching the Ivy League schools, at one time the bastion of liberal thought, now watching those three presidents of those schools, wow. And you go back to, if you're reading the history of Europe leading up to September of 39, Heidelberg University, where this sort of Junkers class, the elite, dueling scars on their cheeks, they were doing what's being done at Yale right now. Your turn, 303-696-1971. Why? Why is all of this turning? 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Morning again, everyone. It's so good to be here. Billy Thorpe and Peter Boyles, Mark Crowley, 710 KNUS. We are Denver's talk station. I'm sitting in for George this morning. He'll be back on Monday, and I get to do the 9 to noon show tomorrow here on 710 KNUS. As I mentioned, the weather's beauty, 52 today, 58 Saturday, 60 on Sunday. A couple of things to read. Boyles, my question is why the world has always hated Jews. I don't understand. This is coming from a person who is as religious as you are. Also adds, you and the family have a good and safe Christmas, New Year's. Would you do me a favor? Oh, this is to you, Billy. Can you have Peter say, go Raiders, to congratulate? As you know, following the rise of Christianity, and there's something called the blood taint. And the church, there was only one, it was the Roman Catholic Church, blamed the Jews for the death of Christ. And one of the most derogatory things that Jewish people were called, they called them Christ killers. I heard it as a kid. And I don't know which pope it was. I don't know if it was John. I think it was John that left everybody off the hook and said, no, it's okay. You're cool. But a lot of that stuff, and you go back and we're talking about the protocols of the elders of Zion that was written again from the Orthodox Church, from Nicholas Romanoff's father. And he has the Okhrana, the secret police, and they manufacture these manuscripts about, again, about what Jews had done. And a lot of it, the Dreyfus trials in France, we've talked about these things. Richard Croix de Lion, Richard the Lion-Hearted expels Jews. Columbus probably was Jewish, but they switched over to survive. And so it's an age-old question. And now the reports of the rise of anti-Semitic activities in our country since October the 7th are pretty brutal. All right, we'll go to Joe in Arvada. Hey, man, good morning.
Good morning, Pete. A lot of these questions are, I believe, improperly framed. For example, if you were to look at the history of America and then you read the 1619 Project, if you were a student of that history, then you would come up with just garbled nonsense as your resultant belief system, because when your premise is faulty, when your basis is faulty, when all of the things that you've learned are coming from
hold on
absurd nonsense.
It's not true. There are people, and they're called revisionist historians. Not all of them are doing what you claim they do. Revisionists are been brilliant, and I'm reading now about at the end of the Second World War, where the French men decide to attack any woman who had been a collaborator with the Germans or the Nazis. And I always saw that as sort of just cause. And you go back and read it now through the eyes of an Ernie Pyle. And these are guys who would not fight the Germans. They let the Germans do what they wanted to do. Now, the Germans are gone thanks to the Allies. And now they're going to attack their own women. But as been pointed out, well, where were they when the Germans were there? The Marquise is there, the underground is there, but they're not joining up. Now they take it out on the women. Now it's minuscule, but it's point made.
Okay. Well, let's get back to the question. Why is the world turning against the Jews?
Yeah.
See, the premise is interesting, but here your basis is faulty.
Yeah.
If we go back to the basis of the Bible, Abraham. Now, let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Was Abraham a Jew?
No, he was actually lived in Iraq, if he existed at all, which I don't think.
He was a Chaldean.
Well,
it's clear.
But they lived.
He was a Chaldean.
They lived in Iraq, or allegedly lived in Iraq.
Okay.
But there was
let
no
me
Iraq.
ask you this.
All right.
Okay, another question. Why are the Arabs and the Persians, and I'm a Persian, by the way, why are the Arabs and the Persians the children of disobedience?
I don't think they are. I mean,
I know you don't.
You're telling me all this
That's
religious.
not the question.
Right, then why? Listen,
why are they called the children of disobedience?
I have no idea. Tell me.
Okay, well, then I will share it with you.
Okay.
It's simple. Abraham had two children.
Yes, Isaac and Ishmael.
Isaac and Ishmael.
Who's the
now,
first?
Ishmael was a product of a disobedient Abraham.
No,
just let me finish.
Listen, no, because I'm not going to eat up this time.
Oh, gosh. Can't do it, can you?
Abraham's wife gave him the green light to sleep with
Hagar.
With Hagar.
That's right. But he didn't listen to God. He listened to his wife.
No, God didn't tell him to stay away from her.
He told him that he would have children from Sarah, not from Hagar.
But Hagar has the baby Ishmael, and that's the trail that leads to Muhammad. But final question.
Do you agree with this? Do you agree?
No, I don't agree with anything.
That the Arabs are called the children of disobedience,
Joe,
in the Bible.
Why does this matter, Joe? Why does this matter?
It matters a lot.
Listen,
see, this is what you don't understand.
I know. Listen,
this is where you get off. This is where your history is garbled nonsense.
Right, okay.
You don't go on the basis of God's word.
All right.
That's
I appreciate
the problem.
All right. Rusty, you're on a radio show. I can do that for just a certain amount of time. Rusty, thanks for calling the show. Good morning. You're on the air. Hey.
That was priceless.
Yes.
And I won't say why.
That's okay.
However, I think, again, what this guy said, you framed your question wrong or maybe not inclusive enough. And I think the world is turning against not just the Jews, but against the West and against Western values and against the U.S. And right now, just at this point in history, the Jews are the tip of the spear, or the tip of the abyss in terms of who people are turning against. But I used to sort of laugh, and I'm conservative, and I used to sort of laugh at all this stuff, these theories that people are complaining that there's too much emphasis given to the oppressed and the oppressor and all of that. But over the last couple of years, I've come to really believe that that's really what people are. Yeah, what people are informing their values and who they support and who they oppose, and that's it. It's a big deal, and it's wrong.
Well, I don't know if it's wrong. I'll give you the example of blacks.
I think it's wrong.
Okay, but
maybe you don't.
Well, no, here.
So it's wrong.
Give me my example. I'll give you my example.
We both have an opinion. Go ahead.
Would you hang on? African American. Hang on, man. African American soldiers come back from World War II, and their task was to liberate and give freedom to all of these Europeans. They come back and they're told back of the bus, can't drink out of the fountain, all the list of things. And they look at each other. Same thing takes place in Kenya, takes place in Pakistan, where they come home and look at each other and say, what the hell was that about? And that really, although there's been guys like Philip Randolph and people like that, but all of a sudden these guys look at each other and go, what did we just go through? And that's, it's called an underclass. And, you can't kid yourself. The world is divided in classic groups. And in some cases, where there is no other avenue, the French in Southeast Asia, I'll give you 1,000 places, that then it begins. And the colonial or the imperialists are not smart enough to step aside. And that's...
Let me. Can I say something in general? And
of course.
I don't want to offend you, but then again, I don't mind offending
you. That's okay.
You.
No.
I think a lot of times people, myself included, and certainly that last one, they call because they want to be heard, not because they want to be lectured.
Well.
And you're extremely well read, and I'll give you that and everything else. But maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm not sure where you were going with all of that. And
I didn't bring it up. That was his topic to bring up, and.
Well, I'm talking about my call. I don't want to jump on his.
No, cool. No, you're great. It's a good call. It's a give and take. It's all right.
The whole oppressive and oppressed thing is it's so damaging in our system, in our country right now. I'm not talking about what happened in 1947 or 19.
But you must. You can't. That's why. Listen, Rusty, we're coming up on time. That's why history is the great teacher. It could learn from that. Right now.
Sure,
No.
Go ahead.
You say. Take the final comment.
Sure, it's a teacher, but we also have to start with what is now. I mean, what is the reality now as we evaluate a certain situation? And it's not like it was in 1947 or 1955. I've been watching a show about Robert F. Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And my God, the stuff that he was fighting against, the racism, Jim Crow, just so many horrible, horrible things. Those just are not existent now.
Listen to me. I didn't make it now. I said in 1947. I was using it as a historical reference point, but it's true whether, and when you understand that there are people in the world.
Well, if you go all the way back in history,
as we speak.
Well, you're talking about history back what now? It's 100. It's 70 years ago.
But again,
I got 15 seconds. All
right, call me, Rusty. Call me, man. I'm sorry, brother. Good call. Folks on the phone, stay there. 710 KNUS on a Friday, and Peter Boyles for Brauchler. And good morning, everyone. December the 15th, 10 days until Christmas. I'm Peter Boyles, substituting for George Brauchler. And by the way, back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., 9 to noon on our Saturday show, 710 KNUS. The weather's beauty, 52 the high today. Then it's a couple of days of motorcycle weather, 58 Saturday, 60 degrees on Sunday. We're talking about, again, Middle East and this notion that the world is now turning against Israel. If so, why? And there's been really some great calls this morning. I wanted to come back to that fellow, Rusty, who I thought had a great call. But this idea, oh, well, that was then, this is now, that's what, the radical left is doing in this country. Well, the Constitution, these were all white men who, by and large, bought and sold slaves. So we can forget that Constitution, that Bill of Rights. We can write a new one. And going around yanking down statues and pulling up, the roots of things, because, well, that was in the past and it doesn't count. Be careful when you start to do that. All right, we're talking about a bunch of different things, but we'll start with Nick on line one. Hey, Nick, you waited. Appreciate it. Good morning. You're on the show.
Thanks for taking my call. I have maybe a simplistic answer to why there's a rise of anti-Semitism and why there's always been anti-Semitism in the world that bubbles up from time to time, then to the point where everybody notices it. We human beings love to find a scapegoat when things go wrong. And quite often things go wrong, and it's just easy to blame a group that really, in most cases, up until the birth of the Israeli state, could defend themselves because they didn't even have a country to go to. They were always scattered all over the world.
When Moshe Dayan, that famous general, had a patch over his eye, and Dayan said, the next time you come looking for us, you'll know where to come. We're here. But that also then negates the problems in the Arab world. And that's why it's so layered. And your point's well taken, because if you read the history in Europe, there was something called pogroms. And they were generally led by somebody in a royal family, and they would, because the Jews were the bankers, or they would be the lenders, and they would get deep into some Ukrainian or some Russian or some Polish count. And so what the count would do would then be find a way to call for the pogrom. And that's what I mentioned earlier. Nicholas Romanov's father, writes those, they're called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's a phony. It's phony. It was done by the Okhrana. It was used against Jews. It was this notion that they're plotting to take over the world. The awful sidebar of it is the men who murdered Alan Berg read the Protocols. And in the Middle East today, the Protocols are still a bestseller. It's totally fabricated. It didn't exist. And as you point out, then you're so deep into debt to somebody, or however you feel about it. Well, let's turn everybody loose on them, and it was led by the church. Either the Orthodox Church or the Western Church, and also the guilt. The blood taint that Jews killed Jesus, and it's all tied up. Your point's really well taken. Somebody needs to.
I just think it's a weakness in the humans that we like to blame somebody else for our own mistakes. Mm-hmm. And what easier group to blame is a group that really couldn't defend itself for the most part.
And that's Western Europe. But in the world, for instance, in Ireland, it's called playing the orange card or playing the green card, principally playing the orange card. The orange card is the Protestant call. As you mentioned, Palestinians and Israelis, they can each play the Palestinian card or they can play the Israeli card. Pakistanis and Indians, they can play those cards. The Japanese played the Korean card. They played the Chinese card. In our country, they played against the card was Native Americans. Play the card. And history is replete with this. It doesn't necessarily have to be against Jews. although that's the history you know of Western Europe. But elsewhere in the world, or even in tribal situations, you play the card. And
well, unfortunately, periods of enlightenment are rare and far apart. And these rulers, correct me if I'm wrong, for most occupations, the Jews couldn't do most occupations except money lending, which was considered
no, they weren't
dirty.
allowed. No, they just weren't allowed. No, you're right. Couldn't own
So
land.
the Jews gravitated towards the money world because that was one of the few occupations they could do.
But if you look at the role before Holocaust of the Jews in Europe, they were the physicians, the intelligentsia, the historians, the doctors, and they played that role. And it's interesting when you read the history of Germany under the Kaiser. Being Jewish under the Kaiser was a hell of a lot better than being Jewish in some of the Allied countries. But then, and it just comes into this place where the Palestinians play that role, where when they're in other countries, in Egypt or Jordan, where they're the intelligentsia, they are the physicians, they are the lawyers, and they play almost an identical role. But now it's spread out across the Middle East. But if you look at the history of Europe legitimately, and you see the role that the Jews play in Europe, it's the one that's on the right side of the brain. It's these playwrights and all of this. Those are the guys. And for Hitler to be able to do what they did just taps into what you're talking about. They were.
And just a comment on the current state of affairs between Israel and the Arab world. You mentioned that the Islamic world already had a change, but unfortunately the change didn't change much.
That's right.
And I personally believe the only way to isolate Hamas, and you're right, you can't get rid of Hamas completely because you're trying to get rid of an ideology held by millions of people. And the only way to do it is limit your exposure to these people and not do much commerce with the Arab world. When you think about it, the only thing the Arab world has to offer the rest of the world is oil. Have they invented it? What you look at every major invention in the last 150 years, it all came from the West. And I'm not trying to put down the Arab world. It's just, this is what history has shown. And it's because they're so backward and so rigid in their belief structure.
I think you'd be surprised at the intricacies of a modern Middle East. But there's a book that I read thousands of years ago. It's called The Formula, and the politics of oil is really significant. It's, you can't really ever wade through all of it. But they're in a boardroom. And they're in London, Savile Row suits, and it's royal. It was the Seven Sisters then. Now there's five, and somebody at the table uses the term the Arabs, and I think it's the head of Royal Dutch, who's obviously an Anglo, says, "You forget, we are the Arabs," and creating Aramco and British Petroleum, all those things, they're the role of the multinational corporations. Then you're right. The countries where there is no oil, Egypt's a classic example. There's no oil in Egypt. I mean, maybe there's a well as compared to maybe to Kuwait. And again, one more, and I'll give it back to you. When you read Osama bin Laden, he called them the parasite princes, hated them. Hated the 1/10 of 1% or whatever the number is in the Arab world who controlled everything, had all the oil, had all the power. If you would.
Egypt, unfortunately, is the most populated Arab country with no oil. It's just the way it is.
But in fairness, when you go there, and they'll tell you they're not Arabs. They'll tell you they're Egyptians.
Exactly.
And again, we do this kind of thing that we've been over so many times. Lebanese are not Arabs.
That's true.
And they're very they're Phoenicians. They'll tell you they're Phoenicians.
Right.
And
the Iranians are not Iranians.
No,
they're Persians.
I had a really good friend of mine that I went to school with who told me aside, me and you are the same guy. And I said, and this before I was, read that part of history. And he said, Iranians and the Irish. He said, no, I'm serious. And he was serious. He was serious. That we're Aryans. And
well,
if you use that word Arab and they get upset. And
I just don't think there's any short-term or even long-term solution between the Arabs or between Israel and Hamas. The only way is to try to limit your exposure to them as best as possible, and not do any business with them.
And then you have to do business with them.
But you have to do it with both eyes open.
Well, I always thought about that moment that John Kerry arrives to talk to the mullahs about airplane parts and the money in the bank and the rest of it. And I think the minute he walked in the door, the mullahs had him. Don't kid yourself that these are simple, out in the desert, running flocks of sheep.
Not simple.
Oh boy.
No. That's not true. And Kerry, as an aside, is a complete embarrassment to the United States.
But how quick before the mullahs had him?
About 2 seconds.
Coming in the door. That's right. I mean,
that's it.
And it so. But don't think of them as all part of this. It's the same thing, just as a reader, a little bit of a traveler. If you think that guy's this guy, you're wrong.
That's right.
And
I have to say, unfortunately, Kerry went to Yale, which is a blot on the whole Ivy League, which is now called the Poison Ivy League.
Yeah, take a second with that real quick, and then what do you do with that? I mean, the Ivy League. Remember the great joke? How do you tell a guy that went to Harvard? You ever hear that joke?
Tell me the joke, because I went to Yale.
Okay. How can you tell a guy went to Yale? Don't worry, he'll tell you.
I never tell people that I happen to go to an Ivy League school, because I don't think I'm any better than anybody else.
Oh, no.
And I could have gotten just as good an education someplace else.
Yeah, no, but I was intrigued, man, by when I finally started to realize I wasn't the fool that I thought I was. And I thought, man, you went to an Ivy League school. And I actually was on the Princeton campus once, which I thought, oh, it's beautiful. And favorite story, I'm walking with a guy who was a TA there, and he was a history guy, and our wives had gone to school together. We went to visit them, and there's this big house, and he said, guess who lives there? And I thought, well, that was probably Woodrow Wilson's house, because he had run Princeton. He looks at me, he was like Sam the plumber, some mafia boss in Jersey. Great. So what he lives there? Oh, okay. Real quick. What when you see these with three women, what do you do with that we're talking?
Do with what now?
About when they were in front of about what was taking place in terms of anti-Semitic activities in these Ivy League schools, and they had MIT, or the other woman was at Harvard. Those are
they were an embarrassment. If you listen to the interview, it goes to show how wrapped up in their ideology they are. They can't see the proverbial forest for the trees. They are that nearsighted. And the best way to combat it, I think it's great that they've been exposed for what they are. They're hypocrites.
I'm not doing the Daily Show, but I thought to myself, they have to go back and defend. If they'd have ratted everybody out and said, you're right, but they had to go back and face their faculty. They had to go back and face the student body that's already been, and part of that is, and I believe this is now the alternative media streams that are really everywhere. And it's the days of ABC are gone, or the New York Times are gone.
Which is good because it's been democratized.
Oh, I'm reading I got 3 books going on, but about Jeff Bezos buying the Washington Post from the Grahams, and then his coming war with Donald Trump. And I mean, it's always what lies beneath, a couple stooges, or at least a
Right.
stooge like me, that go, wow. And they had to sell it. They had to sell the paper. And Bezos, who I've liked through this much of the book, as far as I can go, he's absolutely brilliant. You know, he really is. He's a brilliant guy, and they know they're going to clash with Trump. They know it's coming, and Trump invites them to the White House to have a dinner, and with Bezos and his staff, and it's like this clown show dinner. And Bezos knows, and Bezos is the devil his due. When he created Amazon, or whatever came out of Amazon, that's really brilliant, and so who are these guys? Well, those are the guys. So,
well, I'm glad that the Ivy League has been exposed to the extent that it has been exposed, and hopefully we can have an honest dialogue going forward, because this mystique that the Ivy Leagues had for 200 years, 300 years is simply not true. Just because you go to an Ivy League school doesn't make you any smarter than anybody else.
And I want to agree to that, but when I began truly attempting to get an education, going to school and being part of that, and they always hung that out there in some liminal moments. Well, it's not Harvard, it's not Yale, it's not Princeton. And when I went to Princeton just to see it, I was in awe. I was like, oh my God, how cool would this place be to go to school? And then
the older buildings and the Ivy and the history and all that, it kind of overwhelms you. And then you realize, this is all true, but they're not any smarter than you.
Oh, I agree with you. I've been around a lot of those guys, and they're actually kind of dumb. Well, some of them are really smart, though. I mean, some of those guys are really brilliant.
Yes, they are. And there's some dumb ones like Kerry.
Well, Kerry, I think, was just an automaton. I mean, he was just a robot and he married the Heinz woman whose husband was killed. Right. And I mean, he's rolling in the dough. And,
right.
So they are what Wright Mills called the power elite. And they
yes, he is.
Yeah. Oh, clearly.
But to me, as an American, it's embarrassing knowing this guy is trotting around the world, opening his big mouth, and people are laughing behind him, behind his back.
Well, but when I was an undergrad, there was a historian by the name. He just used the letter C, and then his middle name Wright. His last name was Mills, and was a Marxist. Rode a motorcycle to school, which always endeared me. But he wrote a book entitled The Power Elite. And when I hear people talk about, now the Trumpers all talk about the swamp, and they talk about, well, they're saying what Wright Mills said. And to try to boil all of Wright Mills's work down, he said the tremendous amount of power and money that's controlled by such few people. And he made the case that if you control 51% of anything, you control it. I mean, you and I make a deal. I'll give you 49% of the deal. I'll take 51. It's my deal. And
that's right.
And so when he talked about the small amount of people, banks and corporates and others who do control, greater than 51% of the U.S. economy. Now, remember, Mills is writing in the 50s and 60s, but does it hold up? And and are they, as he called them, the power elite? And
I agree with that. There is a power elite. There are probably less than 3,000 or 4,000 people in this country that control over 50% of the wealth.
Well, that was exactly what Mills said. Exactly what Mills said, and that was this Marxist analysis of American capitalism. And today, when I listen to people who profess to be capitalists, they are echoing Mills and they're echoing Marx. Marx says the same thing.
But here's the problem. That problem, the concentration of power, or the tendency for a society for power to gravitate to the upper 5% of the population, it's true in a Marxist society or a capitalist society. And if you had an honest world, the government would act as that referee to make sure there's a level playing field. But you know how that works.
Sure, and you're right. And the deal was done when Bezos buys it from the Grahams. And he didn't spend that much money of his money to you and I, or at least it'd be a lot of money. He spent $250 million to buy the Post, and he's really done well with it. I mean, I got to hand it to him. But they knew the clash was coming. Inevitably, they knew it was going to happen, and he still came in. And again, he's a guy that makes. There's Gates. There's him. I finished Isaacson's book on Musk that I recommend to people. These guys they've only existed because of the ability under capitalism to rise. So, I always go back and read something else. Listen, take the last comment. Another great call. It's yours, please.
Well, the real problem is, I know this is a red herring, is human nature. It's human nature to always, not always, but quite often blame somebody else for your own misgivings. And it's easy to blame the Jews. It's just easy because there are not that many of them. And up until 70 years ago, they didn't have their own country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just easy to blame the Jews for anything that goes wrong.
On the frontier, who did they blame? The Native Americans.
Yes.
I mean, but again, that closes the circle. And in Ireland, who did the Catholics blame? The Protestants and I mean, but around the world, you find somebody to hang it on.
Right. Right. Because it's easier. It's just easier. Of
course it is. And
of course it is.
Yeah. Man, thank you so much. Hey, Nick, thank you for a great call, man. Thank you.
And by the way, I was a classmate of George Bush, and he was a disgrace.
Oh, I once met or did an interview with Ronald Reagan's son, Ron, the guy that people used to say things behind his back. And we're just sitting talking. He actually was a cool guy, and I loved his dad. And he said when Poppy's vice president, he said W used to come to parties and be so smashed that he just leaned against the wall. He said,
I've seen it. I saw it firsthand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not funny.
No,
it's not funny.
It's like watching Rudolph Giuliani. Giuliani is, I mean, it's not my job to claim someone's an alcoholic, but if you ever saw one, it's him. And
that's right.
And it's been said that, in the distant future, or perhaps in the near future, some housekeeper is going to have to get into the room, and he'll be there. He'll be dead. But that stuff that he did yesterday and the day before, I'm going to testify.
Oh, it's embarrassing.
But it's real alcoholic behavior. It really is.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again.
Man.
Thanks for your time.
Amai, please. 303-696-1971.
Hey, Peter?
Yes, sir.
Just before I step aside,
yeah.
I appreciate Nick's call, but we do have to do just a hair of a course correction based on the question of what has the Arab world invented or contributed in the last 100 years. If you have that question and you don't believe they have, you haven't bothered to look. To be fair, a simple search on Google in less than 5 minutes will demonstrate advances they had in chemistry, Nobel Peace Prizes they won, advances in prosthetics, advances in mathematics, advances in quantum physics. One of the leapfrogs that we've had forward in lithium-ion batteries is due to Arab scientists. They now have prosthetics that transmit actual touch and feeling from the prosthetic to the brain. That's a team of Arab scientists. Okay. So before we sit there, and then the reason that I feel we have to course correct is because just like we were talking about, people are just denigrating and washing the Jews with one. That's the same thing. You're doing the same thing when you say, well, the Arab world hasn't done anything decent in the last 100 years, hasn't invented anything. You haven't bothered to look. I mean, just to be fair, look, then now I'm going to shut my pie hole and go talk to the phones. Right. And we got to take a break.
We'll come back and pick that up. 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles, back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. 15th morning in December 2023. Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. George will be back Monday. I turn around, do 9 o'clock tomorrow morning here on 710 KNUS. The world turning against Israel, and it's really been a great morning. Some really very, very good callers. So where do we begin? At the top? All right, we start with Pete. I'm sorry, I went to somebody wrong. I apologize. Hey, Pete, you're on the air, man. Thank you, and good morning. I can hardly hear you. Speak up, please.
Sorry, can you hear me, Pete?
Yeah, there you go. Good morning, man. Thanks.
Sorry, great call. Great subject as usual. You just had a caller on that asked what we could do to try to bring short-term Middle East peace. Or, the problem is our own foreign policy over the last 20 years.
Longer than
biggest
that.
Mistake,
Longer than that.
Well,
yeah.
The biggest mistake we made was going after Iraq. They were in absolute checks and balances in that region. They have allowed, with the disintegration of Iraqi as a regional power there, they've allowed Iran to step into that void.
If Saddam were alive, if George Bush and Dick Cheney had not lied so badly to the American people, none of this would be going on. Saddam was there. Your point's well taken.
I agree. The other thing that I think have failed to do, at least, not the hugest fan of Trump, but Trump at least became energy independent, and we were no longer viable. I think that was a brilliant strategic move on his part. If we in the West, especially Europe, were able to become energy independent from the Middle East, those people would be at each other's throats, and Israel would be an afterthought. That's my opinion.
When one of the things that Trump did that I thought was also brilliant is he had a plan for Gaza, and it has beautiful beaches. I mean, I got one trip and that's it, but you get full value. And Donald Trump had this proposed plan to build resort hotels, and to build them right along the ocean front in Gaza. And as some wise man once said, the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And they rejected the Trump hotel deal, which I thought it would employ people, because their unemployment in Gaza is staggering. All young.
But the Palestinians, Pete, are just they're a ploy. They're used by the Iranians.
Yeah.
They've been used by these countries for 30 years.
More.
It doesn't matter. They don't want peace over there.
Well,
because
again,
the Palestinians are literally being used. They can't see it. You can't wake people up for whatever reason. And that's the problem. I really believe that the Israelis would love to have peace. They have offered the two-state solution for years now. And the answer is no, we're going to wipe you off the face
Well,
of
here,
the earth.
if you back it out, the Palestinians have been pawns, like in a chessboard, and now you get to the point where they're backed up now to the Egyptian border. Egyptians don't want them. Jordanians don't want them. It isn't that you don't want this individual; it's what comes with it. And I mentioned earlier, read the history of the invasion of Lebanon. All of that was predicated on Arafat and the PLO. And now I'm reading things this morning that on West Bank, they want to get rid of Mahmoud Abbas. And because he's not radicalized enough, and that he's a propped up Western puppet. Now, I'm not the smartest guy. I'm certainly not even the smartest guy in this conversation this morning, but tell me how you work your way out of that.
Well, we missed a golden opportunity too with some of the uprisings in Iran, not to support, and that directly falls on the Obama administration. And falls about the Biden administration.
But Poppy Bush tells the Kurds to rise, and when they do, Saddam does what the British did, gasses them, horrible things that he does to Kurds. British did the same thing. History,
but I think the Kurds are a different story here because
it was a point.
I don't think the Kurds are used as the Palestinians are.
In fact, Kurds are fierce fighters. Been around Kurds and helped fundraise for Kurds. There is no such place as Kurdistan. It's just it's in many ways it's like Palestine or something.
Well, it's an ethnic group that is surrounded by extreme.
Oh.
The Turks don't like the Kurds. The Iraqis don't like the Kurds.
Everybody's trying to kill them. And they can't.
Well, they're the Muslim version of the Israelis. Is what they are
in some ways, but historically, Arabs and Kurds do not get along. And again, both Muslims, both there where they are, but Kurds are who they are, and they're tough. That's one of the things about them. They're extremely tough as people. And no, your questions or your statements are really relative. But so, final question: how do you get out of it?
I don't think you can get out of it.
No.
Here's what I think. You need someone who understands not your Nikki Haley's, not your Warhawks. You need someone to step back. I think step back, and you have to support Israel, but you have to be very tactical about doing it.
What?
The other thing you have to do is you cannot fund these people in a way that they're funding their own war against Israel in the West. And that's what we've done for years.
Here's one. Do you have any empathy whatsoever for Palestinian people?
Absolutely, I do. But I also think that they're very ignorant and that they've helped create their own misery by continuing to allow the people that they've elected to listen.
The people,
they're very much like a lot of Democratic voters in my book.
There we go.
And I'm not. Well, here's the problem: is we've had nothing but Democratic-run cities in this country for the last 30 years, and these cities are going to hell in a handbasket.
Agreed.
They refuse to look at why, and why? Because they're run by Democrats, and these social policies that are implemented by these Democrats are proven failures, and they continue to vote. So how do you do that? The Palestinians are the same.
But two things. They're lined up. The Democrats, when they win, and they didn't steal anything, when they win, it's because they're saying to somebody what they want. When you see a city like Denver that has this, when you just thought there couldn't be anybody worse than Michael Hancock, we just got him. And so, but it's principally because of voters who are Democrats. Back to your thing on the Palestinians, and I got to pause. There's been all kinds of polling data done, and on the West Bank, the wartime opinion amongst Palestinians that came out Wednesday, there's a huge support for Hamas, and they see Mahmoud Abbas, and 90% of Palestinians say Mahmoud Abbas should resign. And so when you go into a warlike moment, and you got to understand them. I'm not, you don't have to defend them, but you sure as hell better understand them. I really enjoyed your call, Pete. Really.
Well, I think they're a lot like the Japanese in World War II. They're not gonna wake up until they realize that they've destroyed their own.
But that was true in Germany. I get on the list of places. It's not what you think it is. But what was Mike Tyson's great line about everybody thinks something till they get punched in the nose?
Yeah.
You take care, man. Good, brother. Thank you.
Care.
All right, everybody. 710 KNUS Denver's Talk Station. I'm Peter Boyles, back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Billy Thorpe's got the con. Billy, let's pull the pin.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Good morning, everyone. Peter Boyles on the air for George Brauchler. I get to come back here tomorrow morning at 9 and do it again. This topic is red hot. Really smart callers. 52 will be the high. 60, that thing on Sunday looks great. We're talking about the war, and we're talking about Israelis and Palestinians. We go to Frank. Hey, Frank, you waited. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Hey, thanks, Peter. Appreciate your show. I love it when you talk history.
Thank you.
This thing's been going on. This Muslim hate, Jew hate, Christian hate's been going on for centuries. My question for you is, what's your opinion on why October 7th happened now, today?
I think in some ways it was a horrible example of the Tet Offensive of February 1968 in Vietnam. They went and the Americans won Tet Offensive, but at what price? And later, when you read Gap, they knew exactly what that was, and that was the Sunday Punch. It was they were going to lose. They knew they were going to lose, but they wanted to bring attention. On the other hand, people have seen like Netanyahu. Also, part of the factor is being backed by the Iranians. The other part of it is the U.S. is bogged down. I mean, they really live off of us. And so when the chance comes, I personally believe that that's maybe the trigger, is that they wanted to do as much damage to their enemy as they could. And maybe in some ways, the Israelis served them up what they want, the invasion of Gaza. That's as far as I can go with it. What do you got?
Well, I'm a little more focused, I think. I think it's basically the total incompetence of our leadership, current leadership.
I mentioned that. Yeah,
and,
I said that.
Yeah,
but there's more than one variable in that.
Oh yeah, there always is.
Yeah.
And but I think when these people are not stupid.
No.
They look around. They look around and see what the lay of the land is, and then they make their decisions every day like the rest of us do. And they look at our current leadership and they realize,
Joe's,
he's completely useless.
Well, Joe has what, 2 or 3 carrier fleets now, and they're striking. That's what Barbara Tuchman's notion of a tripwire war, which World War I was. Joe Biden, listen, Joe Biden, I think most of the day doesn't know he's Joe Biden. And
yeah, but that's nothing new. Years.
My point is that when you got somebody, the POTUS or the shot caller, and so how quickly could the U.S. get sucked into this, or better yet, get sucked into Ukraine? I mean, you can make
it's scary, actually.
Fair, thank you, Frank. It's very scary because
very scary.
Because these, I always said this.
We have all the assets we need to basically take out any of these places we wanted to take out.
But you can't.
We don't have the leadership.
You don't. Well, you don't. I mean, you don't do that anymore. And the last great moment was Hiroshima or Nagasaki. And then now the world is a different place. And so when Biden, you see Biden.
It is and it isn't, though, Peter.
Well,
I mean, I hear it's a different place. Yeah, things change every day. But the truth is that America, we have assets that none of the rest of the world has, period.
That doesn't mean
and we could use those assets to stop this.
Would you use American weaponry? Would you personally use American weaponry with American pilots or tank drivers against Palestinians?
As far as what I know right now, there's no need for it. I mean,
no, but you were using.
Israelis are doing fine.
You're saying, but America has this weaponry.
I would stay out of their way.
Well, Biden is urging caution right now. He's telling Israelis to back it down.
Yeah, he's just another example of Biden idiocy.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know if it's him or it's his people.
Point well taken. Have a good morning, man. Thanks, everybody. What a great show. Thank you so much, Billy Thorpe. Thank you. Now, Lou and I will be back here. Lou Gonzalez and I will be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. It looks like we got the hitman, Joe Williams, which is always a great hour of talk radio. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for listening. It's all yours.